The air in the Pentagon's most secure briefing room was already suffocating. But when the general made a dismissive hand signal meant only for elite operators, my choice was simple: expose my hidden past or lose everything. Dr. Eris Thorne felt the weight of 4 stars on her shoulders before she even saw them. The corridor leading to General Madsen's office was a monument to institutional power, the polished floors reflecting the cold, impartial light of the recessed fixtures above. This wasn't just a meeting, it was an ordeal. Madsen, the legendary head of the Joint Special Operations Command, JSOC, was known for breaking people, not for making small talk. His reputation was a mix of battlefield genius and psychological warfare, and today, Eris was the target. Her heels clicked with unnerving clarity on the marble, a countdown to her professional judgment day. She was a civilian, a cultural anthropologist whose doctoral thesis on non-state actors in the Sahel had, somehow, landed her on the radar of the most powerful military machine on the planet. Now, she was being considered for a core advisory role on a new counter-terrorism task force. It was the opportunity of a lifetime, if she could survive the gatekeeper. The heavy oak door bore a simple brass plate, General K. Madsen. She knocked twice, a sharp, decisive sound. "Enter," a gravelly voice commanded. The office was a shrine to a warrior's life. Glass cases held medals, walls were adorned with photos of Madsen alongside foreign dignitaries and grizzled operators in desert camouflage, and a massive mahogany desk stood like a fortress. Behind it sat the man himself. General Madsen was in his late 50s, with a face carved from granite and eyes the color of a winter sky. They scanned her from head to toe, a silent, comprehensive inventory that missed nothing. "Dr. Thorne," he said, his voice devoid of warmth. He gestured to a leather chair that looked like it was designed to swallow its occupants. "Have a seat." Eris sat, her back perfectly straight, refusing to let the chair intimidate her. The general toyed with a heavy glass paperweight, a miniature globe trapped in crystal. He didn't look at her file. He already knew everything in it. This was about what wasn't on paper. "So, you're the academic who thinks she can tell my operators how to navigate a tribal conflict," he began, the condescension barely veiled. "You wrote papers. You sat in libraries. You've never had sand in your eyes or the taste of cordite in your mouth. Tell me, doctor, what can you possibly offer men who have lived the reality you've only studied?" Eris had prepared for this. "General, with respect, you have the best tactical experts in the world. My role isn't to teach them their job. It's to provide a different lens, cultural, social, political, to help them anticipate second and third order effects. To understand the human terrain as well as you understand the physical one." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. The human terrain. A nice, clean phrase for a very messy business. He stood, walking to the window that offered a panoramic view of the Potomac. "I think the problem with your generation of analysts is that you believe conflict is a data set. An algorithm to be solved. You think you can quantify courage, predict loyalty, chart the path of a bullet." He turned back, his gaze pinning her to the chair. The atmosphere had shifted. This was no longer an interview. It was an attack. Real warfare, doctor, is learned in blood and chaos, not in a classroom. It's about trust forged under fire. It's a language spoken by a select few. His voice was low, almost a whisper, but it filled the room. A language you will never, ever understand. As he delivered his final, dismissive sentence, his right hand, which had been resting at his side, moved. It was a subtle, almost casual gesture. His fingers curled and extended in a specific configuration, a classified hand signal used by Navy SEALs. It was a sign for a compromised asset, indicating extreme danger and a threat from within. To an outsider, it was a meaningless twitch. To someone who knew, it was a siren. But it was the way he did it, with a smug, challenging glint in his eye, that told Eris everything. This wasn't a warning. It was a test. A final, arrogant dismissal. "You are not one of us. You will never be one of us." Time seemed to warp, the hum of the building fading into a dull roar in her ears. Her mind raced. Ignoring it was the safe play, the civilian play. It would confirm his bias and likely end her chances here and now. But something deeper, an instinct forged in a past she had buried under years of academic rigor, took over. Her left hand, resting on the arm of her chair, moved. With fluid, economical motion, her fingers shifted into the precise, corresponding countersignal. A signal that meant, negative. Asset is secure. I am in control of the threat. It was a silent, two-word sentence in a language of ghosts. A language he had just declared she could never understand. The change in General Madsen was instantaneous and absolute. One moment, he was the predator, a four-star general secure in his power, radiating an aura of dismissive authority. The next, he was frozen, his face a mask of pure, unadulterated shock. The smugness vanished, replaced by a wide-eyed disbelief that seemed to shatter his composure from the inside out. The heavy glass paperweight, the one he'd been toying with, slipped from his suddenly nerveless fingers. It didn't just drop. It fell as if the electrical signals from his brain to his hand had been severed. The crystal globe struck the polished surface of his mahogany desk with a sickening crack. The sound was like a gunshot in the silent room. A web of fine fractures radiated from the point of impact, a permanent scar on the desk's perfect finish. His gaze was locked on Eris's hand, then shot up to her face, searching for some sign of trickery, a hint that he had imagined it. But he found only her calm, steady gaze meeting his. The color drained from his face, leaving his weathered features pale and ashen. His mouth opened slightly, but no sound emerged. This man, who had faced down enemy commanders and briefed presidents in the Situation Room, was utterly speechless. "General?" Eris asked softly, her voice cutting through the ringing silence. Her single word broke the spell. Madsen stumbled back a step, his hand instinctively going to the secure intercom on his desk. He fumbled with the button, his usual precision gone. "Security," he rasped, his voice a strained whisper. "Lock down this office. Now. Protocol Alpha. Protocol Alpha." The highest level of internal security alert. It was reserved for active threats, espionage, a breach of the most critical nature. Within 60 seconds, the office door burst open. Two armed military police officers in full tactical gear entered first, their weapons held at a low ready, their eyes scanning the room. They were followed by a woman in a severe black suit who moved with the predatory grace of a career intelligence officer. She was tall, with sharp, calculating eyes that immediately assessed the scene, the shattered paperweight, the pale general, and the calm civilian sitting in the chair. "General Madsen," the woman said, her voice crisp and authoritative. "Agent Kira Shaw, CIA Internal Security. You reported a Code Alpha breach?" Madsen, struggling to regain his composure, pointed a trembling finger at Eris. "Her. Dr. Thorne. She responded to a compartmentalized Tier 1 communication. A signal she has no possible way of knowing." Agent Shaw's gaze fell upon Eris. It was like being examined under a microscope by a scientist looking for a deadly pathogen. There was no emotion in her eyes, only cold, professional analysis. "Dr. Thorne," Shaw said, her tone leaving no room for argument. "You will come with me. This conversation is over. Your security interview has just begun." The two MPs stepped forward, flanking Eris. As they escorted her from the room, she glanced back at General Madsen. He was still standing behind his desk, staring at the fracture on its surface as if it were a crack in the foundation of his world. The power dynamic had not just shifted, it had been inverted with a single, silent gesture. Eris Thorne, the academic, had just become the most dangerous and inexplicable person in the Pentagon. The more appropriate setting was a windowless box buried deep in the subterranean levels of the CIA's Langley headquarters, a place known only by its designation, Room 12. The air was cold and recycled, smelling faintly of ozone and paranoia. The only furniture was a bare metal table and 3 chairs, all bolted to the concrete floor. A single, ominous recording device sat in the center of the table. Agent Kira Shaw clicked it on. This is Agent Kira Shaw, Internal Security Division, conducting a priority security interview with Dr. Eris Thorne. The subject is being investigated for unauthorized access to and use of SCI-level communication protocols. She turned her unervingly placid eyes to Eris. Dr. Thorne, you are advised that lying to a federal officer in the course of an investigation is a felony. Do you understand? I understand, Eris said, her voice steady despite the chill seeping into her bones. For the next 6 hours, Eris was subjected to a masterclass in psychological deconstruction. Shaw and a rotating team of 2 other interrogators, a stern-faced man named Williams and a younger, more aggressive agent named Cale, worked on her relentlessly. They didn't shout, they dissected. They started with her childhood, her education, her travels. Her semester abroad in Jordan was painted as a potential recruitment ground. Her fluency in Arabic and Pashto, once assets, were now treated as red flags. Let's talk about your doctoral research, Dr. Thorne, Williams said, sliding a thick file across the table. You spent 18 months in the Sahel region. Niger, Mali, Burkina Faso. A hotbed for extremist groups. You claim you were studying tribal dynamics. Who financed this research? My university, and a grant from the Kellerman Foundation, Eris replied, for the 3rd time. The Kellerman Foundation, Williams mused, a smirk on his face. A known front for foreign intelligence services. Did you make contact with any members of Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb during your time there? I made contact with local elders, community leaders, and refugees. My work required me to understand the landscape from the ground up. I did not meet with designated terrorists. But you were in their area of operations, Agent Cale cut in, leaning forward aggressively. You moved through their territory. How did you manage that without their permission? Unless, of course, you had it. They twisted every academic achievement into a piece of a sinister puzzle. Her papers on insurgency tactics weren't analysis, they were potential playbooks. Her network of international academic contacts wasn't for research, it was a spy ring. They were building a narrative, brick by brick, that she was a deep cover agent for a hostile power. Exhaustion began to set in, a heavy cloak she had to fight to keep from enveloping her. They offered her water but no rest. The constant, circular questioning was designed to wear her down, to make her slip up, to make her contradict herself. Let's go back to the signal, Shaw said, returning to the room after a short break, her energy renewed while Eris's was draining away. General Madsen confirms it was a Navy SEAL extraction variant. A signal used to identify a compromised asset during a hostile recovery. It's one of the most closely guarded secrets in SOCOM. We've cross-referenced your entire life. You have no military service. No family in the SEALs. No official briefing that would ever expose you to that kind of information. So, I'm going to ask you again, Doctor. How did you know it? Eris felt the walls of the small room closing in. The truth was locked away behind an oath so absolute that acknowledging it felt like a betrayal. But the alternative they were constructing for her, a life in a federal prison for treason, was just as final. She looked at the two-way mirror on the wall, knowing unseen eyes were watching, analyzing her every flicker of emotion. She was trapped. As the interrogation entered its 8th hour, Eris knew she was approaching a breaking point. Her mind was a fog of exhaustion, the same questions echoing in a relentless loop. Shaw and her team were sharks, sensing blood in the water, circling closer with each pass. They had taken her life's work, her passion for understanding complex cultures, and twisted it into a weapon against her. They had built a prison of suspicion around her, and the only key was a truth she was forbidden to speak. The oath she had taken was not to a flag or a country in the abstract sense. It was a promise made to specific people, a vow to protect a secret that had kept them alive. Breaking it felt like a desecration. But as she looked at the cold, convinced faces across the table, she realized that her silence was no longer protecting anyone. It was about to condemn her. She had one last, desperate option. A protocol for a situation so dire, so outside the bounds of normal operations, that it had never been expected to be used. Eris took a slow, deliberate breath, centering herself. She pushed aside the fatigue and focused, her expression shifting from weary defensiveness to quiet command. "Agent Shaw," she said, her voice clear and firm, cutting through the interrogator's latest accusation. The sudden change in her demeanor made Shaw pause mid-sentence. "I believe I am entitled to make one phone call," Eris stated. "It wasn't a question." Shaw scoffed. "This isn't a TV show, Doctor. You have no such right in a national security investigation." "This isn't a request," Eris countered, her eyes locking onto Shaw's. "It's a procedural necessity. You are required to facilitate it." The sheer, unwavering certainty in Eris's tone gave Shaw a moment's pause. It was a flicker of doubt in the agent's otherwise impenetrable confidence. "And who, exactly, would I be calling?" Eris leaned forward slightly. The air in the room seemed to crackle with sudden tension. "I need you to place a secure call to Admiral Jonathan Cole, Commander of Naval Special Warfare Command." Shaw's eyes narrowed. "The head of all Navy SEALs? On what grounds?" This was the point of no return. Eris held Shaw's gaze, delivering the words exactly as she had been taught, her voice low and steady. "Tell Admiral Cole that his asset from Operation Sundown Echo is compromised." She paused, letting the weight of the code name settle in the sterile room. Then she delivered the final, critical piece. "And tell him, the Echo needs to come in from the cold." The effect was seismic. Agent Kira Shaw, the unflappable, iron-willed CIA interrogator, recoiled as if she'd been physically struck. All professional detachment vanished, replaced by a look of profound, almost fearful, astonishment. She stood up so abruptly her chair scraped loudly against the concrete floor. Her face, which had been a mask of cold skepticism for hours, was now pale with shock. What did you just say?" she stammered, her voice barely a whisper. "You heard me, Agent," Eris said, pressing her momentary advantage. "Make the call. Now." Shaw stared at Eris for a long moment, her mind clearly reeling, trying to process the impossible. The code name, the specific phrasing, it wasn't something a traitor or a common spy would know. It was an authentication key to a door she didn't even know existed. Without another word, her hand trembling slightly, Kira Shaw turned and snatched the secure phone from the table. "This interview is suspended," she announced to the recording device, her voice tight with a new, unfamiliar emotion. "Pending immediate command-level verification." It took less than 30 minutes. The door to room 12 burst open not with the cautious entry of an agent, but with the force of a man who owned the ground he walked on. Admiral Jonathan Cole was a living legend in the special operations community. He was in his early 60s, still radiating the coiled energy of a lifelong operator, his civilian suit doing little to hide a frame built for combat. His steel-gray eyes swept the room, instantly dismissing Kira Shaw and landing on Eris. A flicker of recognition, then profound relief, washed over his stern features. "Everyone out," Cole commanded. His voice was quiet, but it carried an authority that was absolute. "Admiral," Shaw began, "this is a CIA internal." "Agent Shaw," Cole interrupted, his voice dropping to a dangerous, icy calm. "You are currently standing on the edge of a cliff, about to step into a world your clearance level doesn't even grant you a parachute for. Take your people, leave this room, and seal the corridor. Nobody comes in or out until I say so. Am I clear?" "Crystal." The room emptied in seconds. Alone with Eris, Admiral Cole walked to the recording device and switched it off. He then pulled a small, sleek device from his pocket and activated it. A low hum filled the room, a sophisticated audio jammer. "Dr. Eris Thorne," he said, his voice finally softening as he sat opposite her. Or should I say, Echo? Tears Eris hadn't allowed herself to shed during the entire ordeal now welled in her eyes. "Admiral. I wasn't sure you'd remember," he finished for her, a grim smile touching his lips. "Eris, what you did is burned into the memory of every man on that team. The real question is, how in the hell did you end up in a CIA interrogation room?" Eris quickly recounted the meeting with General Madsen, the hand signal, and the subsequent investigation. As she spoke, Admiral Cole's expression grew dark, his jaw tight with controlled fury. "Those bureaucratic fools," he muttered. "They almost blew the best-kept secret in SOCOM." He leaned back, studying her. "Have you told them anything? About Sundown Echo?" "Nothing, sir. I maintained my cover." "Good," he nodded. "Because what I'm about to tell them cannot be unsaid." He stood and began to pace, his hands clasped behind his back. Operation Sundown Echo was initiated 3 years ago. Intelligence suggested an extremist cell in the Sahel had acquired cesium-137 from a looted medical facility. They were building a radiological dispersal device, a dirty bomb. Their target was a major European port, a catastrophic attack that would have crippled global trade and caused panic on a scale we've never seen. The pieces of her past clicked into a much larger, more terrifying picture. She had known the mission was critical, but not this critical. The problem, Cole continued, was this cell. They were ghosts. No electronic chatter. They operated on trust and blood ties alone. We couldn't get an asset close. Every operator we sent in was spotted a mile away. We needed someone who didn't look like an operator. Someone who could blend in, someone they would never suspect. A cultural anthropologist, Eris said quietly. Exactly. A brilliant academic with legitimate credentials to study tribal movements in the region. He stopped and looked at her. We gave you 2 weeks of hellish training at a black site. Hand signals, comms, survival. The SEAL team you were attached to, Bravo team, thought it was a suicide mission. They thought you were a liability. She remembered the skepticism in their eyes, the gruff silence of their leader, a senior chief they called Atlas. Atlas told me later you were the fastest study he'd ever seen, Cole said. Within a week, you were communicating like you were born to it. The mission had started perfectly. Eris, under her cover, made contact and began feeding intelligence back. But then, it all went wrong. Their local contact was compromised. Bravo team walked into a sophisticated ambush in a remote desert town. They were pinned down, surrounded, with their primary comms destroyed and a sandstorm rolling in that grounded all air support. That's when you made a choice, Cole said, his voice thick with admiration. Your cover was intact. You could have walked away, and no one would have ever known. Instead, you broke cover, got to a hidden cache of their own radio equipment, and became their guardian angel. The next 12 hours were a blur of terror and adrenaline. Eris, using her knowledge of the local dialects and the enemy's own communication patterns, became Bravo team's eyes and ears. She created phantom diversions, fed the enemy false intelligence on the SEAL's position, and guided Atlas and his men through a labyrinth of alleys and tunnels they never would have found, all while using the hand signals and radio protocols she'd learned just weeks before. It was a masterpiece, Cole said softly. You saved the lives of 6 Navy SEALs, and you secured the location of the dirty bomb for the follow-on force. But we had a problem. Your cover was blown. We couldn't have the world know that a civilian academic was directing a SEAL team rescue. So you erased me, Eris said, the grim reality settling in. We had to. Dr. Eris Thorne was reported to have been tragically killed in a bandit attack. Her body was never recovered. You returned to your life with a classified gap in your record and an oath of absolute silence. Cole sat down again, his expression serious. A silence you upheld, even when it almost cost you everything. Now, it's time for that silence to end. The next morning, Eris stood in a different Pentagon room, a formal, flag-draped office belonging to the Secretary of Defense. The atmosphere was no longer hostile, but thick with a sense of gravity and awe. Present were Admiral Cole, a humbled and deeply apologetic General Madsen, and a stone-faced Agent Shaw. Standing beside them was a man with a rugged face and eyes that held a deep, unwavering gratitude. It was Senior Chief Atlas, flown in overnight from Virginia Beach. "Doc," Atlas said, his gruff voice breaking the formality as he pulled her into a bone-crushing hug. "Damn good to see you. Heard you rattled some cages around here." Eris laughed, a genuine, relieved sound. "Good to see you too, Chief. How's the team?" "Still ugly, still dangerous, and still alive, thanks to you," he said, his expression turning serious. "We never forgot." Before she could respond, Admiral Cole stepped forward, holding a polished wooden case. "Dr. Thorne, by order of the President of the United States, and with the recommendation of the Secretary of Defense, it is my honor to present you with the Defense of Freedom Medal." He opened the case to reveal the highest civilian award given by the Department of Defense for heroism or meritorious service. "This award, and the actions it recognizes, will remain classified," Cole said as he pinned the medal to her blazer. "But let it be known in this room that your courage 3 years ago prevented a global catastrophe." General Madsen stepped forward next, his posture stiff, his eyes filled with a respect that hadn't been there 24 hours earlier. "Dr. Thorne, I owe you an apology. My methods were inappropriate. I was testing a candidate. I had no idea I was in the presence of a national hero. I was wrong." "Thank you, General," Eris said, accepting his apology with grace. As the small ceremony concluded, Atlas lingered. He pressed a small, smooth object into her palm. It was a piece of desert rose, a type of crystal formation unique to the region where they had been ambushed. "The guys and I carried these," he said quietly. "You taught us it was a local sign of good fortune. A way to build trust. I've carried this one ever since. We wanted to give it to you then, but you were a ghost." His eyes met hers, filled with an unbreakable bond. "What you did over there, it mattered. You weren't just an asset, document. You became one of us. SEALs don't forget their own." As Eris left the Pentagon that evening, the weight of the medal on her chest felt like an anchor, grounding her in a truth that had finally seen the light. Her new assignment on the Joint Task Force began Monday, no longer as just an academic, but as a bridge between two worlds she uniquely understood. The setting sun cast long shadows across the Potomac, but for the first time in 3 years, Eris Thorne felt like she was no longer living in one of them. Eris's story is a powerful reminder that heroes come in all forms, often from where we least expect them. What does real courage look like to you? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and please, always comment with respect for the diverse experiences of others. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more true stories of hidden heroes.